Greetings, good people, and a warm welcome to Heaven Bless the Little Ones. I'm your host and television journalist, Tom O'Connor. And we have a guest today, Father Gavin Reilly. He's been on our program one other time discussing the life of Padre Pio. Today we're talking about a new future saint, and maybe he's a saint already. And I'm going to let Father tell you who it is. Welcome, Father, to Heaven Bless the Little Ones.
Nice being here, Tom.
And you're a Capuchin Franciscan.
Yes, I'm a Capuchin Franciscan. I'm from St. John's on 31st Street in Manhattan, and I entered the Capuchin Franciscans, the same order that St. Bernard of Corleone belonged to, whom we're discussing today.
Yeah, that's good. But the other point is that in the year 2004, you have done something that many people don't do. You have arrived at your 50th year as a priest.
Yes, if God spares me, as my father used to say, I'll be 50 years a priest in 2004. Wow. I became a Capuchin when I was young. I was a boy in grammar school in the Capuchin parish, and one day we were having a play, and while we were having the play, before the play, the brother in the school said that the Capuchin Franciscans, who ran the church, were a very austere order. Ooh. And it appealed to my ideals as a boy, and I decided to join the Capuchins.
So you want to be a heavy monk friar?
Right, correct.
Oh, and so you were.
That's right. I joined the order at that time.
And so because of, actually, you were a professor of my wife's at Lady Cliff College for many years, and she introduced me to you. And, of course, you were at our wedding, and you baptized our children. So you're really a member, or we're a member of your spiritual family.
That's correct.
But now we're going to talk about St. Bernard of Corleone.
That's right, St. Bernard of Corleone.
Alone. It sounds like an Italian place.
Corleone is a little town, a little city of some 18,000 people or more now. It was 18,000 when St. Bernard of Corleone lived there. And it's south of Palermo in Sicily. Sicily, as you know, is the bottom of Italy. It's like the football that's being kicked by the boot of Italy.
Yeah.
And so
that name, Corleone, it reminds me of something with Marlon Brando and The Godfather. Is there any correlation?
There is, in fact. It's the town that Mario Puzo, the author of the Godfather, used as the center for his novel, and became the name of the family in the movie, the Godfather. And it has always been connected, in a certain sense, with the mafia. Actually, it's interesting that the mafia means refuge, and they were actually people who were trying to defend the country against invaders. First with the Arabs in 710, and then with the Normans in the 1100s, and then finally in the time of St. Bernard of Corleone in the 17th century, the Spanish under Charles III were governing the country, and these were always little groups of people that were trying to defend the people of the area from invaders. And so there is some connection there. That's how the mafia started, and who knows whether or not Bernard of Corleone, before he became a Capuchin, belonged to one of those groups. It's hard to say.
He was a protector of the country.
Yes, yes, actually.
Things have changed slightly from the mafia in those days and the mafia today. But let's talk about this saint. What kind of family did he come from?
Bernard of Corleone was from a rather pious family, actually. His father was Leonard Latino, and his mother was Francesca Sasha. And his father died when he was 15. His mother died when he was 59, so she outlived her husband quite a bit.
Oh, really?
And they had 10 children, and he was the 5th of the 10 children born. And he was baptized Philip Latino.
When they talk about saints, unfortunately, they say some are well-educated and some have very little education, but they seem to arrive at the same point of sanctity. The education of St. Bernard.
He was a man who had a trade. He was a cobbler like his father, and when his father died, he took over the cobbler shop. And he was illiterate. He was not able to read, But after he entered the order, he tried to learn to read.
That's read Italian.
Read Italian, that's right, or the dialect of that area. And he tried to learn, but at the time, it was difficult. And supposedly, according to his witnesses at his beatification, he received a vision from the Lord saying that he shouldn't be concerned with books, that the book that was important for him was the book of the crucifix, which he could, from which he could learn mystical things.
Well, that is a mystical connection.
Yes, very mystical, yes.
And so you'd have to be taught by God. Is that what this mystic is saying?
Well, there are certain things, of course, that we don't know about his interior life, and this would be one of them.
Oh, well. So the thing is that, so he was then a Capuchin, but why did he choose that type of monastery? Weren't there others, like Trappist and Benedictines and others around?
Well, the Capuchins had entered Sicily about 1570, and he was born in 1605. And so the Capuchins were there, and it was quite a strong province, even though it's just about 100 years after the Capuchins were founded. And there were 500 friars in his province and 33 monasteries, or we don't call them monasteries, we call them friaries, 33 friaries in the place at that point.
Well, I was a Trappist monk. I wanted to be a brother, but I never wanted to become a priest. Now, he apparently chose only to be a brother and not a priest, or is that somebody else's selection for him?
I would think that it had to do with his illiteracy, in one sense.
Because the Latin Mass was still in vogue then?
Oh, yes, absolutely, yes. And also, sometimes it's hard for people to understand why some people choose to be brothers and other people choose to be priests. Brothers take 3 vows, the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, being poor, giving up legitimate sexual pleasure, and being obedient to a superior, poverty, chastity, and obedience. Priests in the order also have the same 3 vows, but the difference is that a brother has the sacrament of baptism and confirmation, but he doesn't have the sacrament of holy orders. And that's the difference. And usually, to receive holy orders, you have to be able to study theology, and we can see that since Bernard of Corleone was a man who had no letters, that would be difficult for him. But also, there's a call from God to each of the 2 states. They're separate states. One as a layman with vows, the other one a cleric with vows.
To be a monk in those days, was that unusual? Did you have a particular temperament, or was there degrees of superstition that hell was opening its door if you didn't become religious? And they also had, I understand, austere penitence.
Yes. Well, I think we should first of all realize why he entered. The reason why he entered was when he was a young man, 21 years of age, working in his cobbler shop, he was a swordsman. There were tournaments of swordsmen at that time in Sicily, and he was considered the leading swordsman of Sicily at the time.
Swords that kill people?
There's swords that kill people and with which you duel, you know.
Oh, you duel,
and
yeah.
he was a swordsman, and he was a big man, and he had a fight with another townsman whose name, nowadays they say it's bitter wine, Vinagro.
That's
we'll
his
just call him
first name
Vinny.
or
We'll
last?
call him Vinny.
Okay, Vinny.
He had a fight with Vinny, and he broke 2 of Vinny's fingers. And Vinny was very incensed with that temperament, that he had, and he got a hitman to come from Palermo. His name was Canino, Vito Canino, to come from Palermo to kill Bernard of Corleone, whose name at that time was Philip Latino. And Philip Latino was in his cobbler shop, minding his own business. He did not seek out people to hurt. He could be provoked. And his parents, his sister Domenica, said during the canonization process, the beatification process, that his parents warned him about being provoked all the time. And, but anyway, Vito Canino came into the cobbler shop and picked a fight with him, and he didn't want to fight, but he provoked him. And they went outside and they started to fight with daggers. But then when Philip Latino saw that this was a serious fight, he went inside and got a sword and struck the man in the shoulder and wounded him for life. The man could never use his arm after that point. Vita Canino. And when that happened, he later on told the friar, when that happened, he thought to himself that this was not the kind of life he wanted to live, and he thought of becoming a friar at that point, a Capuchin at that point. For a couple of years, he was on the run from the law, but finally in 1626 this occurred. In 1529, they finally arranged the whole thing with a judge, and he was freed from responsibility. And then in 1531, he decided to become a Capuchin Franciscan.
Oh, so Vito and Bernard became friends.
Later on, in 1650, there was like a formal reconciliation of the two before the high altar of a church, where they embraced each other and forgave each other, and from that point on, they were friends.
Are there books about these this particular monk, friar?
Yes. Yes, there are quite a number of books. One of the book that I use mostly for my own research in the matter was written by a man by the name of Spagnolo, and I
Sounds
think
like another Italian.
He is, and I believe he's also a Capuchin.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So this is a plus for the Capuchins. It's going to be a canonized saint.
Yes, and maybe we should understand who the Capuchins are, the order that he entered.
Yeah, because a lot of people who are not, involved in religion, or in particular Catholicism, would like maybe a preface to find out what it's all about.
Well, St. Francis of Assisi founded his order in a situation in which there were fights between cities and disagreements between different classes of people. And so he was a man who sought peace between the cities and brotherhood of men. And those are the two big thrusts of the Franciscan order. In the course of time, the community was known as conventuals, the conventual friars.
And what does that mean?
They lived in larger friaries and had permission from the Pope to own those friaries. But there were always friars who felt that Francis didn't want ownership of anything, so they started reform movements. And in 1517, Pope Leo X separated the conventuals from all these reform movements and called the reform movements together the Friars Minor of the Regular Observance. And so today they're known as the OFMs, the Order of Friars Minor.
Oh, yeah.
And another pope afterwards, another Leo, put further reforms together with them, and they're now called the Friars Minor of the Leonine Union. And after 1517, there were still some splinter groups drawn from the conventuals and drawn from the Friars of the Regular Observance, and they were formed into a separate community in 1528 known as the Capuchins.
Oh.
And their original name was the Friars Minor of the Eremitical Reform. They wanted to be hermits at first.
Sounds like a tongue twister to me.
It does, yes.
Now, can you say that in Latin?
No, I can't say it in Latin.
So then, what I'm interested in is, are you any way interested, other than theologically or philosophically or intellectually, in this particular saint now?
Yes, because he was canonized just this past June.
And it took quite a while for one of the popes to do it. He died in what year again?
He died in the year 1667.
That's a long time to wait to be canonized.
It is. What happened was he died in 1667, and about 8 years later they began the cause for his canonization. And by the year 1762, he was declared venerable. And when you're declared venerable, it means that you have practiced heroic virtue during your life. You've practiced the four cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance, and the three theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity in an extraordinary degree, and then you're declared venerable. We have a Capuchin from the New York metropolitan area who has just been declared venerable by the present Pope in 1995, Father Solanus Casey.
Oh, yes.
Yes, he was 14 years in our church in Yonkers. He was 3 years in the Lower East Side in Our Lady of Sorrows, where I was a pastor for
You
a
were
while.
familiar with him?
Yeah, yes, I lived with him for a year in Huntington, Indiana, when I was a young novice.
Well, then I have a question that wasn't part of our questions, is that, did you know at the time that he had supernatural powers?
Well, we knew he was a saint. We did.
Sometimes you can tell instinctively who's a saint and who isn't.
Well, everyone knew he was a saint at that time. He had long lines of people that were coming to him. He spent 20 years in Detroit after being 21 years, I believe, in the metropolitan area of New York. When he died in 1957, 20,000 people came to his funeral, Father Solanus Casey. But he's not at the topic of our... I'm just saying that he's a venerable today. And then in 1768, 101 years after his death, he was declared blessed at that point, Bernard of Corleone. Then the French Revolution came along, and it stopped the cause. They were proceeding with the investigation of miracles, and it stopped the cause. And it wasn't taken up until more recent times when they decided to use the miracle from that period for his canonization today. And we have another blessed. He was a blessed at this point until he was canonized. We have Padre Pio as a Capuchin also, who was just declared a blessed in 1999, 2 years ago. It was the largest ceremony of a blessed in Rome that Rome ever had. And
Do
so,
the Capuchins have a corner on sanctity? And maybe I'll become a Capuchin.
Well,
Can I become a television host as well as a Capuchin?
well, there is an advantage to belonging to a religious order, because our order is fairly large. The largest order in the church are the Jesuits with 21,000. Then come the friars the friars minor observant with 17,000. The Salesians with 17,000, and the Capuchins with 11,000. And so it's a large order, international. It has an office for working on the causes of saints, and so therefore there are these causes that lie dormant for a while, and then suddenly they're taken up by the postulate because he feels that he has sufficient evidence to show sanctity.
In the world, there's a song called Love and Marriage. In the religious world, is there such a thing as penance and sanctity? Does this Bernard
of Corleone?
Yeah, what kind of penance did he do?
He was a very penitential man.
And what is penance anyway, for the people who are maybe not familiar with the word penance?
He gave up things that were delightful, and he did hard things for the Lord. There's negative penance and positive penance.
Is that the way to become a canonized saint?
That's the way to become saints.
Oh, well.
And sometimes they take on sufferings in order to imitate the Passion of Jesus. It was more common in former ages than it is today that you would do positive flagellations of the body. Bernard of Corleone was known to have done that. That's why in his picture you'll see that there's 3 cords in his hand that he used to use to flagellate himself. Nowadays that's not done anymore.
Yeah, Trappist monks used to do that in monasteries.
That's right.
But you showed me a picture. He was sleeping with was his pillow a log or a stone or a rock?
He slept in a bed that has as a pillow a log. That was his cushion, as it's called.
And that's penance?
That's penance, yes.
Can he get
But we should, I think, see that there are other things that were more difficult for him. For instance, one time when he was in one of the friaries, he refused to vote for a particular friar because of to become to accompany the provincial to the chapter. The chapter is the assembly for electing officers, and he wouldn't vote for this one particular friar. And we can see some of the human element in friaries and among friars. Not everyone is a saint, and they took it out on him, and they reproved him. And one time, the friend of the man whose vote was denied by Bernard of Corleone reproved Bernard for his work in the kitchen. He was a cook most of his life, and he said that the meals weren't good. And Bernard responded to him, and he said, "The friars have nothing to complain about my meals." And then afterwards, he regretted justifying himself, and so he took the hot embers that were in the fire and put them on his lips to try to hold back his temperament, because he could be provoked. See, and I think that's something that we should see in his life. He was a man who could be easily provoked, and he had to work on trying to contain himself. And nowadays, with road rage and everything else, and people in different professions getting angry at their bosses, and even at home we sometimes get angry at one another, we have to control our temper. And I think this is a great message that Bernard Corleone can bring to our times, to learn to control your temper, not to be provoked, or to hold back being provoked.
I think there's an old Irish expression, count to 10.
Count to 10, exactly, yes.
In Latin for monks and the monasteries.
And maybe we should notice also that there was another side to his temperament. All the witnesses say that in spite of his prayers and his penances, he was always a very happy man, always trying to be happy with people. He used to joke with people, and well, we have to talk about this perhaps. In the first 20 years, he was transferred 15 times from different friaries.
Out of popularity?
No, probably out of obedience, to learn obedience. And, but he went without complaining. And then finally, in the last part of his life, for 14 years, he was stationed at the major monastery in Palermo. And during that time, there was another friar there who had a reputation also for sanctity, to become a saint. And
there's no competition.
There were really competition. They were 4 years together. And the one friar said to Bernard of Corleone, "You're never going to be a saint." And Bernard of Corleone said, "You're not even going to be a blessed." So he had a sense of humor, and he tried to be nice to people, and all classes of people.
Do you think he's still working miracles for people? In the later half, or at the dawn of the 21st century?
Well, there are people who are devoted to him and feel that they have been helped by him. I interviewed a couple in Yonkers, New York, Michael Vergola and his wife Antonine Camerata, and they had a club. They were married. They met in Corleone themselves. They were from Corleone, and they married in Italy, and they came to this country about 40 years ago, and they started a club in honor of St. Bernard of Corleone to work on his canonization. So perhaps these clubs had something to do with it. And they used to have a mass once a year in honor of Bernard of Corleone, and they would have a dinner dance, and they would send money back to Corleone, to the town of Corleone in Sicily, to the house where he was born, which had been made into a little chapel. They would send money back there to put benches in the chapel. They would send money to different charitable causes. And it was like a social club here in New York. It's dispersed now for the last 4 or 5 years because the people are getting older. They've moved away with their children. But I went there to interview that couple, and they were very devoted to Bernard of Corleone, and they felt that he had helped them with their prayers and different things. I don't know the specific instances, but they felt that he had helped them.
When I interviewed Mother Teresa, she's a very active missionary type. But she also informed me that she also had formed some parts of her religious order as contemplatives. He was a working friar, but was he also a contemplative?
Yes, he, as I say, he worked in the kitchen and in the garden, mostly in the kitchen as a cook. But he also was a man of great prayer. He used to spend the night in prayer, according to the people at the giving testimony after his life. He used to say that Jesus should not be alone in the Blessed Sacrament, and so he would stay in the church all night long praying. So he was contemplative in that sense. Also, the Capuchin reform in those days had this tendency towards becoming hermits, and so they used to have little places to pray in the woods, in the forest nearby the friar, and he would go out there and spend time there. But on the other hand, he was very pleasant with people. For instance, he's considered the patron of women who are having difficult birth, because he had helped a number of women who were wondering whether or not they were going to be able to give birth. In those days, it was more difficult. You didn't have the medicine.
So how could he help them?
By his prayers.
Oh, prayers.
Yes, and one couple thought they would not have a child. He says, "You'll have a child. Her name will be Anna." And they had a child. Oh. So he's considered the patron of women with difficult births.
Now, somebody may ask you, if they see the show, or ask themselves, how would he know the name of the child? Does he have psychic powers too?
Well, the way the thing is presented, it seemed to be that he had psychic powers, or powers to foretell the future, and we can believe that. That's something that would be part of a saint's way of life.
Well, you mentioned that with Padre Pio, that he had also psychic powers, especially about people coming to confession.
That's right. He
Oh.
could sometimes tell what they were saying before they even mentioned it to him.
Sounds it's a very attractive order to be a Capuchin if you want to rise to the heights of sanctity.
In fact, the Father Solanus Casey, the other blessed I mentioned, with whom I lived in the novitiate for a year, had that reputation that he could read the future. And so at the end of the novitiate, when I couldn't make up my mind whether I wanted to become a priest or not, I was thinking to myself, maybe I should go over and see Father Solanus and have him read my future.
Yeah?
Recently, I met a priest who did that. See, I decided not to do it. But I met a priest who did that, and Father Solanus said to him, say a novena to St. Joseph for 30 days. It's not really a novena, but prayers for 30 days. And at the end of that time, that priest had no further problems about his vocation.
Is that right?
So maybe now that's perhaps what he would have done for me, you know.
What happened if he did the opposite?
That's good. I might not be here today.
It's good you didn't meet him. No problem. Yeah, so it's very interesting. These friars, these people that lived in centuries and centuries ago, are coming up into a new age where that type of monastic treatment is not looked upon too graciously by modern society. What about young men entering religious orders now? Is there many?
No, in the Europe and North America, we have very few vocations nowadays. I could give you an example. In 1968, in our novitiate for the New York, New England province of Capuchin Franciscans, we had 34 novices, more novices than any other novitiate of a male order in the church. We have now 4 or 1, very few. The vocations in the United States are very low, perhaps because of the breakup of family life. Family life is not very stable. Perhaps because of all of the upset during the 60s with drugs and the Vietnamese War, because of secularism where anything holy is kept out of public life. All of these things are affecting vocations nowadays.
Well, we're going to stop that trend. This will be seen by millions of people, Father, all over the world.
Hopefully.
So what happens? You get thousands and thousands approaching your door as future monks and friars and priests.
It would be wonderful.
Because of this show, of course, Father.
It would be wonderful. Yes,
good,
yes,
good.
yes.
Well, then, if you get that many, am I automatically canonized by getting all those?
But you're partly responsible.
Oh, I'm not the whole show.
Not the whole show.
Okay, well, you'll burn for that.
There's
Father.
another half here.
Okay, I'll share the limelight with you. That's good. Well, the thing is that a lot of people say that people that friars that enter monasteries, what's that fancy word they use?
Misogynist?
Yeah.
They
Is there
don't
any
like
truth in
women.
any of that?
They don't like women.
Yeah.
Well, Bernard of Corleone seemed to have very good relationships with the women of the town. He had a very good friend. Her name was Virginia Jalango, and he made a pact with her that if he would die first, she would give loads of bread to the poor. And so yes. So he had good relations with women, and of course he had the best relations with the greatest woman of all, the Mother of God, Mary. He used to say of a picture on the wall in the church in the friary at Palermo that when he had difficult cases and was able to solve them and tell people what to do, she told me.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you some questions quickly, because
Sure.
now we're not running out of questions nor running out of time, but we're running out of eternities for this program to be listened to by the saint in heaven. What did he view Sister Death, and what does that mean?
Well, when it came time for him to die, he died of pneumonia, and
Very young?
No, he was 60. Let's see, now he'd be 62. He was 62 years of age. He had been 36 years religious, and he was 62 years of age, and he said that every day that he had to wait to die was like 100 years. So he was anxious to meet the Lord.
Well, he's met the Lord, and we've met the time. The time has run out, Father. The program was designed for 29 minutes, and that's all heaven is allowing us today.
Okay, good.
This is the rules of the world. Thank you, Father, for being my very special guest.
Thank you for being here.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for allowing us into your homes one more time. This is Tom O'Connor for Heaven Bless the Little Ones, television journalist and talk show host in the dawn of the 21st century. Thank you, Father.